Okay, so for this next video, I'm going to be talking about communication barriers between police and the community. And I'm going to start off with like community blog, like the way that the community can block effective communication. I think that historical mistreatment is a big one because like past experiences with law enforcement can just can like increase with like l lost trust within the community. And if the community doesn't trust law enforcement, they're just not gonna be super cooperative, which is like um it follows with like um I know that it like people being unwilling to cooperate with law enforcement can also follow with like perception of bias. So if they think a police officer's actions are like biased, they're gonna be unwilling to do more for police because they think that they're being too biased, they're not willing to share information, they're unwilling to cooperate with them. So they just don't want to share information. And some communities are against sharing information to law enforcement because they don't want it to come back and make them like a criminal or something. So they have a fear of it coming back and making them look bad. So some people just steer away from it because they aren't comfortable. They don't feel comfortable sharing it because of reasons. And then like there's also like a group of people that fall under this program, and I know it's called like insufficient witness of information or witness program. I have no idea. It's just where like individuals that lack information can be put off from coming forward about crimes because they just don't feel comfortable enough to talk about it, or because they don't want to be made like a prime suspect. They don't want to be made to be painted the wrong person. They don't feel comfortable being a part of it, so they choose not to. Which I would assume that in this program that they can, so they just take advantage of it if they don't have enough. Like if someone came out in the middle of a crime, they probably would fall under this program because they weren't there for the whole thing and then they only saw half of it. The beginning could be way different than the end of it. So if they came out at the beginning and saw like this person doing a crime and then someone else came out later and they saw them doing nothing, then the second person probably would not be called in because they fall under this program, or they would fall under this program and just try not to come forward about information because they didn't see what happened, so they don't have any viable reliable information to be put on. And then I think a big part for the community blocks is or another big part for the community blocks is people who speak a different language. um I know that people with a different language definitely have a hard time communicating with law enforcement. I know I would if I did not speak the same language as my local law enforcement. Like if I went to a different like country and tried to speak with their law enforcement officers, I think that it would be difficult for me but also for them because they wouldn't understand what I'm saying, but I wouldn't understand what they would need from me. So it would just be overall really difficult to talk to them about um whatever they need or anything. And then for police blocks, some police officers may develop a like us versus them mentality, and it makes them view the community as a threat instead of partners, and it just overall makes it really difficult for um law enforcement to work with the community because they see them differently than they should, and instead of working together, they're just going to start working against them because it just becomes too difficult to for them to see them as partners instead of threats. I have no idea. But um I think that um law enforcement does not have enough like or some law enforcement departments could just not have enough communication skills or um what was it? I think it was just communication skills. So it could affect the way that officers interact with the community because it makes them look bad since they don't have the proper communication skills to keep hold of the conversation or how to follow up the next question or the last question with another question. So I think that if certain officers do not have the right communication skills, they will definitely have a hard time um, interacting with the community, and it will just downfall from there because then it'll lead to misunderstandings. It'll lead to not um, like adequate information. So, and then some people feel that if they are treated unfair, that they are gonna either give away like unfair behavior and communication skills or vice versa. Like they do if they do untreated or unfair behavior and unfair communication skills, they're gonna be mistreated or not treated the same. Um, but officers, I definitely think have like within like some degree have uh a resistance to a new change. Like if a certain officer was working a certain way at a different department, they are more uh I think it's reluctant. I think they're more reluctant to accept the new change, the new like protocol for a new department. So they are um just too like too used to what they understand. And it happens more than people would think. At least I think it would happen more than people would think because maybe people are taught differently in the academy than they are in the, the department. So it can just put a hole in trust with the community because they are too in their own way about communication or how to approach a situation or what to do when they approach a certain situation. So, and then for like cultural barriers, I think it's cultural, structural, and I don't remember the last one. But for cultural, I think a big one for this is language differences. Again, officers in the community might speak different languages, so it might make it hard to talk. A lot of misunderstanding, a lot of potential, uh, like hearing the wrong thing. So someone could be telling the officer this, but the officer hears what they want to hear or what didn't happen instead, and it's a bunch of misunderstanding, mishearing things, and then um, body language and eye contact is another part of like the communication or like nonverbal communication. So like body language, eye contact, and the personal space. Yeah. Um, if a law enforcement officer like stands a certain way or acts a certain way, it can, or like stands a certain way, like too close or too far, or like weird eye contact, it can it could possibly offend the community member because they are questioning why the law enforcement officer is doing a certain thing. So they're misunderstanding what's going on, and it just leads to again more misunderstanding because they they might take offense and then they might start acting out, and it just spirals from there, and it could just yeah, I could just spiral from there. And then for cultural, yeah, there could just be a lack of cultural misunderstanding. Like a law enforcement department might not know like the way that a certain cultural area will respond or act or anything. So it could just lead to um insensitive behavior by law enforcement because they don't know how that community responds. So they're just acting how they would, and it could be offensive or insensitive to that community. And then again, like a history with mistrust. Um, I think that that's big for cultural areas because if a certain cultural area has been treated poorly or had a bad experience with law enforcement in the past, it can just create a large like mistrust or like loss of trust. I don't know what the right word is for that, but they can just lose a lot of trust and create like this giant hole, and it makes it harder for the community to cooperate with law enforcement. So again, they won't be willing to talk about any information. They won't be willing to like do what law enforcement needs them to do. Um and then communication styles I think is one of them. So like if someone is more discreet or more emotional, it can affect communication and ways that they can solve problems together. Like if someone is like completely acting out on like on a conversation and problem solving, I'm pretty sure that the officer would just get really confused and it would make communication and solving those problems really hard because of their emotions. And so they're probably not saying the right thing and then they can't get the right help that they need. Yeah. And then like power dynamics I think is one too. And then like for me I take that as like maybe like showing off like the power that law enforcement can have, but um either like law enforcement mistreating the community or like um just conversations like for some like power dynamics with officers and community members, they might be put off because maybe they think they're going to be treated unfair or they're just going to be put off for a conversation to talk about their side of the story or like um yeah, I don't know. I think that's it. Like just being put off for like a conversation on what they understand and what they have and what they can do or what they can give to the law enforcement. And then my last part or my last point, I think, is diversity in the community or the law enforcement. So there can just be a lack of representation from cultural backgrounds, and it just will again largely intensify like misunderstandings and just create more barriers for communication, whether it's just more misunderstanding, more mistrust, or a loss of trust, whatever, and just misleading information, and then like um not listening to certain people because of poor dynamics. I think that that is it for cultural, and then the next one is structural. And for structural, there could be a like lack of resources or training for communication, like technology and strategy wise, whether it's like someone needs like maybe like a radio or a computer or a phone to technology like related communicate with someone else or just like in-person strategies, whether it's like hand gestures or like the way that they say words or the way that they look when they're talking. I don't know. And then like I think that what was it? Physical interact like physical separation of units can make regular interactions difficult because if they need more units, they're gonna need more units. So if they're physically too far apart, it's gonna make it more difficult to get help within certain things. Like if someone's in trouble and they need help, they need an officer, they need another dispatch unit to come help them. And then again, like another set of like resistance to change in communicational practices, like maybe they just are so used to their old habits that they just can't figure out ways to communicate um how they're supposed to now. Like maybe they were taught a different way a long time ago or a little bit ago or literally like a couple days ago, and they're stuck to it and they just can't. They think it's right and they don't want to change. Um, and then like central decisions, I think um their central decision makings, they are like made from the top ranked people um without getting input from the lower ranked people. So it could lead to misunderstandings, like maybe they bypass some important information that could be missed in the lower ranks. And I think that that could be a big like structure or yeah, structural block. And then like outdated communication systems can um affect like the way that like time moves through the conversation, but also like if they're trying to use channels or if they're trying to use like old papers, maybe they got lost. Or maybe they got left behind somewhere or stained and thrown away, or they could just take longer to find or get lost since they're just using like a bunch of paper. And then like some procedure, I think it was procedical. I'm not sure what it was, but I think it was just a bunch of like protocols. So it's like lack of communication um protocols, like information being misinterpreted or lost through different channels, again with like the radios or papers, like it could just get stained, lost, or if they were using like different radio channels and then they accidentally switched. I'm not sure. I feel like that could happen more than it is um presumed. um and then some like, I wouldn't say like insufficient, but like just not having enough training on communication skills can struggle um carrying information. So if someone's not properly taught communication skills, they're just gonna take the information that was given to them and give something else to somebody else. So instead of like learning how to effectively communicate, they're just gonna take what they hear and then tell someone else something else. But if they were taught effectively, then like I can be told word for word and then paraphrase it the same way to someone else, um, kind of thing. And then with that, I feel like with like poor like retelling, it could also just come with like poor documentation or like incomplete documentation, like they missed a point or they missed a question to ask or something. It could just lead to misunderstandings and errors. And it could just lead to a bunch of um like not enough information can be held, so not enough can be done with this situation because there's not enough there is not enough information to keep going because they missed some or lost some or anything. And then with that, like they could take it back to their department, they can get feedback, and I feel like feedback, like regular feedback, if they obviously do stuff like this enough, they will receive enough feedback. But if they don't have enough feedback, I think that it could affect like the way that like later down the road like future mechanisms or communications occur, like mechanisms as in like the devices or like um paper that they use, the way that they ask questions, how many questions they ask, how they word the questions, how they keep the information, because they would obviously have to get better at strategy communications before that they could have better communication. And then uh, I think that the next part is like differences and barriers that originate from communities and those within law enforcement. And first off is like mistrust. Again, like past incidences, like um, can just create um, large holes of lost trust that just either won't come back or can't come back or can't be worked upon. And then like communities being mistreated may feel like that they're being misunderstood or not treated properly, or that law enforcement just isn't working out with them in the way that they need them to. And then for like loss of trust with law enforcement, again, like us versus them mentality, because it makes the community believe that they don't really care, and that they just see them as a bunch of threats instead of a bunch of partners. Again, that's a big one for the mistrust of police. And then like a lack of accountability, like some places just might lack the ability, I mean, accountability to hold officers accountable from what they did, and it will just lose trust. It'll lose trust within the community, within their own department. It could just lose trust everywhere if they don't do it properly. And then language with the community is the next thing. And like some people just might not speak English, or they're not good with English, so it'll just make the entire conversation or like communication string really confusing and really long. And a lot of people like nowadays, instead of speaking proper English, they use slang. So slangs can be misunderstanding, misinterpreted, missaid, because they change all the time. So an officer can think that a slang means something when it truly means something else. So then they tell their department that it means what they thought and it doesn't. So then it's just a bunch of misunderstanding. And then I think it's like multilingual, or officers who speak multiple languages. There's a lack of those in a bunch of communities. So for communities that need officers to speak more languages, um, they can't do that because they don't have those resources or officers um, to handle those conversations for them or help start those conversations. So again, there's just more misunderstandings, more miscommunication because no one can understand what is being said. And then for like strategies that they could use, or for any department, that any department could use for either maintaining trust or improving their own dialogue, is potentially like some foot patrols and neighborhood engagements, because it shows that they're trying to engage with their community but also like gain the trust of their community, show their community what they are capable of, and just interact with them on a regular basis and help them work with like identifying problems and like local issues like neighborhood watch issues. Maybe they could just um maybe they could just help maybe they could help out with like neighborhood watch program like issues or something. And educating, I think another one is like educating officers with um like communication skills, or like language skills, whether it's slang or actual language that the community speaks that's relevant to this certain community. And then like educating officers on awareness of like certain cultural communities so that they know how to better approach the situation, the community, and everyone around. And then um uh, I think my last point was avoiding plain language and using like more clear communication. So like again, no slang, no no broken English, I guess, or like just half English or not trying. So they need to be more clear, they need to be more effective with their words. So, thank you so much for watching. This is the end of my video.